Hey everybody, Miss Lerner here. I'm here to go over the graphic organizer that you guys were assigned this week. I know that it's been difficult because there's been no real like direct instruction on this, but I'm hoping that you're understanding what you're reading and kind of synthesizing the information properly. Besides this, I'm going to also be providing a little review for you as well for an assessment next week. All right, so um, I'm going to go over what I wrote, okay, for these things. Some of it I've expanded off of things that were in the text, but regardless, hopefully you got an idea that these are different perspectives, just like we went over in the beginning of the year, but through which to interpret your personality. Okay, so let's start off with the trait approach. Okay, there are various theorists going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. Hippocrates of Hippocratic Oath fame said that your personality was based on different fluid levels in your body. He called these humors. Okay, so people who were happier actually had more blood and so forth. It seems outlandish today, but it is kind of the basis of our understanding of personality. Okay, we had Gordon Allport who came up with the idea of traits. That these things are going to define us in some capacity. And then we had this man, Hans Eysenck. He said that people were going to be classified according to two dimensions, what we called introversion and extroversion. So introverts are going to derive their energy from within. They don't need to be around other people. They feel they would be, just as happy at home, like reading a book, as being social at a party. Whereas extroverts are going to get their energy from others. Okay, so being social, liking that intense stimulation from other people. The other dimension was what he called emotional stability versus instability. And sometimes another term for emotional instability that we use in psychology is called neuroticism. Okay, so if you are neurotic, it means that your emotions swing out of control. And people who are neurotic typically try to like to feel like they're in control of their world. So they might seem to be kind of obsessive or compulsive or rigid in their actions because they are trying to control something. All right. So the major things that are important about the trait theory is the idea that personality is fixed and static, that you're born sort of with these traits and they don't change over the course of your lifetime. And also what we call the five-factor model that was done by Costa and McCrae. Just that you can be either low or high on five dimensions of personality. And this, you can remember these dimensions through the acronym OCEAN or CANOE, the same thing. OCEAN starts with an O. So O stands for openness to experience. Um, how much do you like to go outside of your comfort zone? Do you like to travel? Do you like to try new things? Okay. If you are high in openness to experience, you would like those things. Conscientiousness. Do not confuse conscientiousness with consciousness. Being conscientious means that you are responsible, dependable, punctual, driven, okay? Like, kind of things that are associated with academic achievement. Extroversion, as I said before, how much do you really enjoy being around other people? Versus agreeableness. How friendly do people think you are? Do people trust you? Do they look at you with suspicion? And then neuroticism, as I said before, is just emotional instability. How much are you unpredictable and prone to negative emotions? Okay, so according to the trait perspective, what is healthiest? Well, being emotionally stable. Conscientiousness tends to be highly prioritized in our goal oriented society. Being self aware, having an awareness of your own strengths and weaknesses trait wise. Okay, so vocab terms. Introvert, someone who's imaginative and looks inward for energy versus an extrovert, which is someone who is self-expressive, drawing energy from other people, stimulation from other people. Emotional instability, which is also known as neuroticism, means that you are going to be agitated and unpredictable. Okay, so what is the criticism of the trait perspective? Well, first of all, it doesn't think that personality can change, which is what we call in psychology very deterministic, like things are set and you can't change them. And it doesn't provide kind of an explanation from where these traits come from. They kind of just say you're born with them, that it's kind of genetic, but that's not really a fluid description or a comprehensive description. All right. The psychoanalytic psychodynamic approach. Okay. When we went over the perspectives, we had said that they privilege certain things, most of which we are unaware of, most of which reside within your unconscious mind. Okay. So Freud is the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. He came up with this idea that you're looking deeper into your psyche to understand who you are, and those things that you want to avoid, or those things that are only present like when you're under hypnosis, or that break through in dreams, are those that are most valuable in interpreting who you really are. Okay, Freud was pretty controversial though. Many of his ideas were based around sex. Many of his ideas were male-centered and misogynistic, and really kind of centered on a specific class of society. Okay, so for that reason, there are a number of neo-Freudians. Okay, this is the people who broke away from Freud. Carl Jung said that Freud was too sexual and privileged spirituality rather than sexuality in the development of personality. Karen Horney, not Horny, Horney, okay, was a feminist who argued against male-centered attitudes in the psychodynamic approach. Erik Erikson, who should seem familiar to you because he came up with the psychosocial theory of development. He said that it wasn't sexuality, it was social conflicts that were important in determining who you were. And then Alfred Adler said that birth order was key to determining who you would be. Saying things like, and of course, this is all theoretical, but saying things like, the oldest child was going to be a born leader and the favorite until they were dethroned by the youngest child. And typically middle children were going to have what he called an inferiority complex, feeling lesser than the firstborn child. And they would try to what's called overcompensate for that perceived deficiency. Okay, so what kind of core beliefs are there? And some of these should be repetitive. Like I said, we talked about this when we went over the perspectives to begin with. Okay, your unconscious has a heavy influence on your personality. Okay, there's internal struggles, early childhood experiences, traumas, dreams. The conflicts within you are going to drive personality. And then there are three parts to your personality: the id, the ego, and the superego. Okay, so let's go through the components of a healthy personality and kind of define the id, ego, and superego as well. Okay, so how do I conceptualize the id, ego, and superego? Okay, the id is going to be kind of like the devil sitting on my shoulder. Okay, it wants something and it wants it now. Okay, it wants to eat. It wants to reproduce. It wants to, have any sort of immediate instant gratification. Okay. So we say that the id operates according to the pleasure principle. Now, we also know that, in popular culture, there's also that angel that sits on your shoulder. We call that the superego. Okay. The superego is what society tells you is right to do. Okay. If the id is saying, I want ice cream for breakfast now, the superego is saying, we can't have ice cream for breakfast. That's not appropriate. Okay. So for that reason, it operates according to the morality principle. The ego itself is going to be like the person within. It operates according to reality. It is kind of like the peer mediator between the devilish id and the angelic superego. Okay. Now, psychological disorders, Freud said, resulted with there being a lot of conflict between the demands of the kind of immature id and the commands of the highly developed superego. And the more divisive they were, the more likely you were to have some sort of psychological issue. So, that being said, a healthy person is going to have a strong ego. Okay. What kinds of things does the ego do in order to maintain balance between the superego and the id? Well, they use the ego defense. It uses the ego defense mechanisms. Okay, so rationalization, repression, regression, reaction formation, um, sublimation, projection, denial, displacement, all of those things that you read about and you worked on your sheet about, and you filled out a sheet about, those are ego defense mechanisms to maintain order between the two parts of the pieces of the personality, the id and the superego. Okay, what are some vocab terms and their definitions? Well, the unconscious, okay, are your ideas in a small unknown part of your mind, those things you're unaware of. Your preconscious or accessible thoughts from your unconscious minds that float up to the surface. So, the typical example I give of a preconscious thought is a lot of times you'll have a dream or something, and you remember it upon waking, and then it kind of disappears as you get ready for school. Then you're walking through the hallway, right? And you see the person that you dreamt about, and you just say, oh, I had a dream about you last night. Okay. That material of the dream was floating around in your preconscious until it went up into consciousness. Now, preconscious can also push things down as well. Okay. Now, as far as the Neo-Freudians go, inferiority complex is when your conscious mind is dominated by feelings of insecurity, and overcompensation is the idea that people are obsessed with being perfect. Okay. I'm not going to worry too much about all of the other vocab like archetype and collective unconscious, etc. We're just going to leave that there to kind of, make it more manageable. Likewise, all of the defense mechanisms and their definitions and applications would be in this area. I would just say to refer to the sheet on defense mechanisms here because it's lengthy. Okay. What are some criticisms? Well, there's a lot of criticisms of the psychoanalytic approach, especially Freud. Okay, Freud placed way too much influence on the unconscious mind, not on the conscious. All of his theory was based on his own childhood experiences and those of upper class, middle class males. They were too sexual and aggressive. It was very deterministic as well. He assumed that by the age of, let's say, 5, you were who you were and you couldn't change it. It also neglected the importance of social relationships. So the Neo-Freudians, the psychodynamic theorists that came out of Freud, tried to account for some of these criticisms. Okay. The next approach is the behavioral or learning approach. Okay, so we've talked about traits, we've talked about the unconscious. Now we're going to talk about how the consequences and associations of our behavior make us who we are. Okay, so there are a number of important people here. There is John B. Watson. John B. Watson was the guy we read about with unethical studies. He was the founder of behaviorism, and he said that he could essentially train anyone to be whatever he wanted them to be, based upon associations that he could create. Albert Bandura came up with what we call observational learning, that you can learn just by watching someone. You can see how to behave, you mimic that person in the absence of direct, what we call reinforcement or punishment. And then B.F. Skinner was the father of operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a little bit different than what John B. Watson was talking about with associations. Operant conditioning dealt with a behavior and the consequences of that behavior, whether it's, a reward like, oh, you were, good in class today, you get full credit on your classwork, or a punishment, you were misbehaving and not focused, so you're going to get a 0. Okay. So he said that we're shaped by what we think is good for society and rewards and punishments. All right, so core beliefs on personality. External forces shape behavior. Your rewards, punishment, and seeing other people determine your personality. So what makes you healthy? Well, good role models, right? If I'm in an environment where people are acting well, I'm going to, be theoretically a better person. Likewise, if I have good consequences to like what are appropriate actions, then that is going to mold me into a good person as well. Okay, vocab terms. Socialization is the process by which people learn socially desirable behaviors. We all go through it at a young age. We socialize. We try to figure out what is appropriate in society and what is not. Even puppies do it. We have to socialize animals if we want them to be well behaved in a domestic environment. Social cognitive theory is this idea that your personality is shaped by your behavior as well as environmental factors. And then there's what's called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy sounds like self-efficiency, and that's really what it is. It means like, how efficient do you think you are? If I set a goal, if I have a high sense of self-efficacy, I'm going to be pretty confident that I can achieve that goal. Okay. What about criticisms? Well, if everything is based upon your environment, it denies free will. Okay, your ability to change your environment. It's really saying that you're kind of this product of your environment. It doesn't explain the internal, it just explains behavior and actions. Great. So we just went over a perspective that was really, really based upon your environment and denied free will. Now we're going to talk about the perspective that is the most free willy of them all, the humanistic approach. Remember, I had said that the humanists were the hippies, man. It's not you, it's the world. Okay? I want to be as great as I can be. It's not, you are an ever evolving, incredible person in the humanistic viewpoint. And you are not a byproduct of things you can't control. Okay? So, Maslow created the hierarchy of needs, which is really important. The hierarchy of needs, you have your most basic needs on the bottom, all the way up to what we call self-actualization, being the best sense of yourself. The bottom is going to be physiological needs, okay, then safety needs, then what we call belongingness and love needs, then esteem needs, and lastly, if you have all of those met, you get to self-actualization. Okay. Carl Rogers, the one thing I will say about Abraham Maslow is that self-actualization was very rare in his viewpoint. He pointed to people like Mother Teresa and Abraham Lincoln, and Eleanor Roosevelt as self-actualized. Carl Rogers was another humanist, but he wanted to think about self-actualization for the rest of us. So he called this being a fully functioning person. And being a fully functioning person just meant that the self that you imagine yourself to be, your ideal self, needs to be equal to your real self, who you are at this moment. Okay. And he called this congruence. Okay. If I could make myself be whatever type of person I would want myself to be, does that line up with where I'm at right now? The more it lines up and is congruent, the more likely you are to be a fully functioning person. Okay. So, what are the core beliefs here? Everyone has a drive to achieve their fullest potential. And they also believed in unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard, supporting someone no matter what. Okay, no matter what they do, even with the most atrocious behavior, that someone could feel supported and feel like that you can talk to them. Okay, components of a healthy personality. Well, being self-actualized, knowing and understanding your needs and feelings and acting consistently, or being a fully functioning person. That would be the healthiest that you could be. Vocab terms: unconditional positive regard, being supported no matter what. We've spoken about that in class. And then self-concept, your view of yourself as an individual. So this sounds so positive, so uplifting. What are some criticisms of the humanistic approach? Well, it's not scientific at all. It doesn't really have much of a scientific basis. It's very vague. What is self-actualization anyway? It's self-centered. It's extremely selfish. Okay. And it doesn't explain the human capacity for evil. Okay. So it doesn't explain why people would be serial killers or do other really horrific acts. Okay. And last but not least, probably kind of like the least comprehensive approach, but important nonetheless, is the sociocultural approach. They didn't go over anyone from the sociocultural approach in your textbooks. We're going to leave that blank. What does a sociocultural approach believe? Well, it focuses on ethnicity, gender, age, and culture on the development of personality. Okay. Me right now in the US, I'm a very different person than if I were, an elderly man in Japan. Okay. Just facts. Okay. Sociocultural approach would really, really kind of hone in on that. Okay. Components of a healthy personality: self-concept, self-esteem, acculturation. Okay. So it does say in your textbook that being bicultural is actually best. So if you have more than one culture, that is actually the best outcome you can have. What is acculturation? Okay, acculturation is just adapting to a new or different culture. Okay, being flexible as such. And then the two more important concepts are individualism and collectivism. Individualism is a trait in which a society or individual prizes personal identity and goals. So guess what? The U.S. is ranked the most individualistic society in the world. Yeah. Okay, number one. So, is that good? Well, sometimes that competition can be ruthless. Okay, and it's good in the sense that in the idea of how we interpret personality to be kind of unique, this unique idea, but it can be really negative overarchingly. Okay, other countries, many countries, let's say in Latin America, are collectivist. Okay, this is where the group's goals or the goals of the collective are more important than the individual ones. It's cooperation, not competition. But that being said, in collectivist societies, personality is not really that prized. You don't want to be unique. You want to blend in. Okay, what are some criticisms? Okay, well, different societies are going to value either individualism and collectivism, and personality. The idea of personality is going to be modified as such. And as I said, it is hard to have a unique, what we call personality in a collectivist culture. Okay. I hope that, obviously your answers can be somewhat different than this. This is just kind of a starting point. I wanted to kind of talk about some of the concepts so that they weren't that foreign to you. I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk through them with me. Please reach out if you have any questions. I'm also going to be talking to you with a review of this. We will have a short quiz next week on this information. Okay. But I will give you the exact types of questions on the quiz. It will just be a short 10-question quiz. All right, everyone, it's great to see you. Hope you're hanging in. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.